Dr. Pierre Dimitrov.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the nice introduction. You know, it's amazing for me to be here with you. You know, coming from Bulgaria, it's such a long way. I've never imagined that this would be possible for me, to come and share my work with people from the States, people from Los Angeles, and also people from Europe. You know, it's just a great opportunity. I'd like to extend my kind thanks to Abdi and to Murdat for inviting me. Abdi, I'm really happy that our relationship developed so fast, you know? So thank you guys, you've done an amazing job organizing it, and you have been just the kindest people to me, making sure that I feel right at home with my wife, with my friends that are here today. So my topic, the main one that we're going to be discussing is the adhesive indirect posterior restorations. So compared to the previous speakers, we're going to be dialing it back a bit in terms of, we're going to be talking about something way simpler than a smile makeover or implant rehabilitation. So I just want to give you insight of some basic techniques, some fundamental steps that I like to use in my practice. First, I just want to say a quick word that I'm coming from Sofia, that's the capital of Bulgaria. You know, maybe you don't know too much about it. It's actually a really nice place. Bulgaria is a small country in Eastern Europe, and everything that we know about the States is actually based on like Hollywood movies, video games, cartoons that we grew up with. And to be here, it's really an amazing and exciting opportunity for me. So I'm from Sofia, I live there and I practice there at a clinic called Denta Consult. So we are 5 dentists. The clinic is oriented around integrating digital technologies in all sorts of treatment. You know, usually I'm doing more restorative and prosthetic work on teeth, but we do everything as a team. So we do also ortho, we do implants, we do surgery, pediatrics, so we cover all the spectrum of treatment options. Also, we have a digitally based dental laboratory, so a fully functional dental lab. And this is a big benefit for me because I get to spend a lot of time not only in the office, but also in the lab. You know, I enjoy doing a lot of my own lab work, and I think I've learned more about the indirect restorations and prosthetic treatment actually in the dental laboratory rather than the office and just treating patients. You know, I think that combining the both points of view is very important. And in the laboratory, you can really see the things that you do in the office that will actually make the technician's job a lot easier or make it way harder. And I want to make the job for the technicians easy. And we'll discuss that a bit more into detail as the presentation goes. So before I start with everything, I just want to create like a little frame, you know, the main rules and the main concepts that I like to follow and keep in mind always when I'm working. And this is something that we will follow through the presentation. So first of all is we gotta have a deep understanding of natural morphology, function, mechanics, and aesthetics as well. So I'm obsessed with natural morphology, you know, observing digital scans or extracted teeth or models of natural teeth. I feel like this is the best and most divine reference that we can have. And the more you understand about natural morphology and about nature itself, you know that you can merely challenge it and try to get as close as possible, but it's never going to be the real deal. Right? So that's why we should prioritize prevention and non-invasive approaches. I really enjoyed the lecture yesterday by Victoria. I think that this is an amazingly important topic that we should focus on, and especially in Bulgaria, we're more focused toward treatment rather than prevention. So this is just, for some of our patients, it's already too late to focus just on that, just on prevention, because they've already had too much dental work done, old restorations, big prosthetic constructions, that might have served the patient for 15 or maybe 20 years, but the condition that we have the teeth underneath those restorations is most of the time there are teeth that need to be extracted or that are going to be very, very compromised. But I think for the younger generation, it's not too late to focus on prevention. Good oral hygiene, good dietary habits, good facial development, is going to be preventing not only caries and other diseases of the soft tissues, but also orthodontic misalignment, tooth wear, which we see basically everywhere nowadays, tooth wear. So we can just prevent all those conditions, and I think this is very important. Now, when we have to intervene, of course, we have to pick the appropriate materials for replacing the missing structures, so replacing dentin and enamel. And Clary already touched on that topic. I'll just share my view on using different materials when we're talking about indirect posterior restorations. So together with the materials, of course, we need to use the appropriate tools. We're going to look into my top 3 tools that I'm using in the workflow. Of course, we have to work on mastering our adhesive procedures and improve our skills. Okay, this is something that I take very seriously, practicing. For me, working with the patient is not practice, right? So if you're a basketball player, you go and you practice every day. You don't practice when you're at the game, right? So I like to practice a lot. Usually I take at least 1 hour a day before the patients or after I finish working with them, just to practice on extracted teeth, just to practice something in the lab, practice something on like a CAD software. And I think this has helped me improve. Also courses, you guys are all here to learn something, to improve your skills, and this is a part of the process. Okay, and when we're talking about indirect adhesive restorations, for me, it's really important to break free from all those retentive and resistance-based principles when we're speaking about preparation, because we're going to be relying mainly on the adhesion of the restoration to the tooth structure, the prepared tooth structure. And last but definitely not least is prioritizing survival of the tooth rather than the restoration. And for me, this is the big difference between the adhesive approach and the conventional prosthetic approach when we're restoring teeth. We're prioritizing the survival of the tooth. So even if something happens to our restoration, and believe me, it will happen because they don't last forever, we still have a lot more to do and to keep the tooth in the mouth of the patient, functioning and everything. It's not like with big post and cores, crowns, where we have to retreat, the tooth is in such a bad condition that most of the time it even can be extracted. We can lose that tooth. Even though the patient can be happy, the crown was there for 20 years, we can't do anything more about it. Okay, so just a bit about biomechanics of tooth structure. The shape of the dentin, the shape of the enamel, how they are both related to each other and connected with the DEJ. A really nice paper that was very interesting for me, and I think it's a nice place to start on your biomimetic, bioemulation journey. It's the histoanatomic analysis. So the article is split into 2 parts. The first one is more about the structural analysis, the shape of the dentin and the shape of the enamel. So we have the concave dentin and the convex enamel, which creates different areas where enamel is more thick, and then the dentin towards the core of the tooth gets bigger size. And this is very important because the enamel is the hard outer protective shell of the tooth, and the dentin can provide a lot of flexibility. So all the masticatory stress and forces are distributed towards the dentinal core of the tooth, and this makes it very load resistant. Of course, when we have different cavities, this resistance is going to change. Especially when we start losing marginal ridges, we can see a significant drop in the load resistance of a tooth. That's why cavities like a big and wide, like buccolingual direction, wide MOD cavity, especially combined with the endodontic treatment, are some of the cases that we need to do something more in order to restore them and protect them for a long time, so we don't have cracking of the residual walls or some fracture, especially when we have endodontically treated teeth. And it's an interesting topic that also we're going to discuss. Of course, some of those we're not always going to use indirect restorations, like in a simple class 2 cavity, limited to one side, we can easily do most of those cases with a direct composite restoration. Even some MOD cavities, we can do composite restorations. It can be direct, it can be indirect, like a composite inlay. But once that cavity gets so big that the residual walls are super, super thin and almost without any support with dentin for the enamel, this is where we have to do like a indirect adhesive restoration and maybe even reduce and cover a certain cusp. So talking about cuspal coverage, I know there might be some confusion about it. You know, I'm still looking for the right answers myself, but usually I'm either reducing it by choice or by chance. So if I'm reducing the cusp by choice, and this is going to be mainly in the cases of cracked posterior teeth or very, very thin residual walls, I'd like to reduce just to make space for the restorative material. So this is going to be related to the minimum thickness required for the certain material that you are using. Sometimes that reduction is going to happen by chance. So the patient is already coming in with the fractured cusp. He's always already coming in with the fractured wall. So then it's already reduced. You know, we just need to place our margin, and most of the time we can reinforce the remaining tooth structure. But take that in mind, that if you are going to reduce the cusp, we just want to cover the minimum thickness of the material. Of course, some cases might be exception to that, and I'm talking about like really thin residual enamel walls where we might need to reduce a bit more by choice, just because it's like you see those super cracked wall that's almost going to break in front of your eyes. In terms of the material selection, and we already discussed a bit about that, so for the dentin replacement, I think that the composite materials are a great choice. Just a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by any company, so I'm just sharing with you the materials that I'm using in my practice. I don't get paid to advertise any material. So usually for the dentin replacement, I'm using those flowable composites. So these are the GC materials, the Genio Universal Flow, the Genio Universal X, and the EverX Flow dentin. I've used the Genio for quite a long time now for building up the dentin core and also for covering my immediate dentin ceiling. Especially the Genio Flow X is a really great material for that, because you don't need to manipulate it anyway. You just need to put it on the surface, give it a few seconds, and it goes like super smooth, like glass. It's really nice because it's a bit more flowable. If you want to build a bigger bulk of the dentin for your core buildup, let's call it, you can either use the Genio Universal Flow, which is a bit more, it doesn't flow that much, so it's less flowable. You can easily manipulate it. Same with the EverX Flow dentin. Something to keep in mind with the EverX Flow is that it shrinks quite a lot. So I would advise you to use it in small increments if you're using that material. So don't do it like a bulk fill. Try not to connect it to too many surfaces all at once, because it shrinks quite a lot. Talking about indirect restorations, most of the times we're going to be replacing the missing enamel with the ceramic material. And there are a lot of them on the market. You know, they can be different in the way that are produced in the lab. So we have, of course, the CAD/CAM materials, the blocks. It can be layered, it can be pressed ceramic. You know, there's so many ways to do it, but I think right now the most popular is the CAD/CAM materials. So that's the ceramic blocks. It can be, we got lithium disilicate materials. Basically every different brand has their own lithium disilicate. Some of them are not crystallized, some of them are pre-crystallized or fully crystallized materials, which is going to change the way that they do it in the lab. Also, we have the group of the hybrid ceramic materials. So even though it's called a hybrid ceramic, I just like to think about it like a super high quality composite material, you know? And this is the material that I'm using for restorations that are going inside the tooth. So the two choices that I'm using for the indirect posterior restorations are lithium disilicate materials and the hybrid ceramic or the hybrid composite materials. I'll try to explain a bit more when I'm using the different materials, when we're talking about the indications of those kind of restorations. But the main thing I like about the CAD/CAM materials is that they're always the same. You know, there's a certain level of consistency in the material that is hard to reach when you're doing pressed or layered ceramic. So every time the surface of the material is going to be the same. We can treat the surface the same way in every case, and we can expect basically the same mechanical properties from the material without any defects inside the block. So we don't have air bubbles, we don't have different layers overlapping each other in the block. So I really like those kind of materials. And of course, the adhesive systems, which is going to help us connect our materials to the tooth structure. Of course, OptiBond FL, I think that's the gold standard. But lately, I like this one as well, the G2Bond Universal. So it's part of the universal adhesive groups. Still, it's a two-bottle system. So we have the primer and the adhesive. The adhesive is pretty highly filled. So it still provides us with a thick hybrid layer that can polymerize. And if you're using only adhesive for the immediate dentin sealing, you can polymerize just the adhesive and it's going to be thick enough to polymerize well, something that Clary was already talking about. With OptiBond also you have to do like a total etch, and with the G2Bond usually you can do like selective etch. So you can do just etching of the enamel when you're doing your direct restorations, or you cannot etch at all if you're doing just the dentin sealing. So a bit more versatile in my opinion. Of course, OptiBond FL has been proven in time as a sure option for you guys to use. Now let's look at some of the essential tools that we can use. Of course, number one is rubber dam isolation. Like for me, the adhesive techniques, you can't really do them that well if you don't isolate the working field perfectly. And the rubber dam provides you not only a dry working field and isolate from fluids, but it also just improves the comfort that you're working. You know, it gets out of the way the cheeks, gets out of the way the tongue, the soft tissues. I mean, you can even get up, go outside of the office, come back and continue working. Everything is going to be the same, right? If you have cotton rolls everywhere and you leave the patient alone in the office, I don't know what you're going to find out when you come back, but definitely not going to be the best possible conditions for doing your adhesive techniques. So we're always working under rubber dam isolation. Of course, I like to manage it with the time because I want the patient to have a relatively pleasant experience. I mean, as much as it can be a pleasant experience going to the dentist. So if I'm doing like more teeth, like quadrant, maybe I can start to work and to remove some of the old materials and clean the teeth without the rubber dam. And then for the final cleaning and for the preparations, for the dentin sealing and everything, then I can isolate and minimize a bit the time that the patient has to spend with the rubber dam, because I don't want to torture the patient to stay with the rubber dam for like 5 or 6 hours, you know. Another very versatile tool is the air abrasion unit. I'm using the AquaCare, and I find its use in everything that I do. So it can be used for prophylaxis. I think that the powders that they have for cleaning are super effective. When I'm doing a cleaning, in Bulgaria, there are no hygienists. So we have to do the cleanings ourselves. So I'm doing also a lot of cleanings for my patients, you know, checkups and everything. So they have really nice materials for cleaning, like airflow, sodium carbonate polishing, also the silk particles. And then you have your aluminum oxides, which are going to help you remove caries, remove old materials, treat the surface of the tooth before your bonding protocol, and also treat the surface of different materials when you're going to be bonding them on your preparation. So indispensable to have is the air abrasion unit, especially when you're going to be bonding to composite material, you know, and thinking about immediate dentin sealing and covering the dentin with adhesive and sometimes composite on top, you know, we need such a device in order to have a good connection to that material that we already placed on our preparation. Something that I can't imagine now that I can do without is magnification. You know, you can either use loupes or the microscope, but I wouldn't advise you guys to go and get like a 2.5 magnification. It just doesn't do the job, you know, it's too small. It's like bringing the object halfway closer to yourself. So I actually started doing a lot of endo. I want to be an endodontist when I started working at the clinic. So I started using the microscope pretty early, but then, you know, going back and forth to the clinic and the lab, I decided I'll get a pair of loupes that I can use, you know, in the office and also in the laboratory. So then I got the 5.5s, and quickly after that, maybe a year or two, I decided it's not enough for me. I want to see more, and I think that it's a rapid way to improve your work. You just boost the magnification a bit. So now I'm using the ×10 magnification from Surgitel, and I'm really happy with it. You know, some people are surprised, you know, like, isn't it too much? Well, I think it's not too much. And it's always actually never going to be enough, you know, so. But not just magnification. Illumination and the combination of both is what really makes it work. So if you have your loupes without the necessary light, it's going to be really hard to see anything and to control what you're doing. So the combination of the magnification and the illumination is something really, really great that if you're not using magnification, I can't recommend you enough to just go and get a pair of loupes, and your whole work will change very, very quickly. So now we know about the materials, now we know about the tools. I want to discuss which are the cases that we can you know, utilize those kind of indirect restorations. And maybe in your mind now is just those full coverage indirect restorations like an onlay or like overlay, you know, but you can use the indirect restorations in many ways. It doesn't always have to be covering the full surface of the tooth. Like in this case, you know, the patient already had an old restoration that was covering only the mesiobuccal cusp of this upper molar that I have removed. And maybe I can do that directly, you know, no problem. But here I'm missing the reference from the buccal wall. So this is going to be hard for me to create and get that. You can see that the neighboring teeth have a really pronounced shape of the mesiobuccal cusp. So this is going to be something very difficult for me to do freehand, and then my matricing. So I decided to do it with an indirect composite restoration. I like, in those cases with the partial restorations, I like the composite materials, the hybrid composite, hybrid ceramic, because they're a bit more flexible than the lithium disilicate. yeah, these are the kind of cases that are going to be partial restorations, much like a cavity for a direct restoration or your MOD inlay cases. I think that those hybrid composite materials work very well in that situation, but also you might want to do a direct, like a class 2, but the teeth are too far apart. And then you try your matrix, one system, the other system, this wedge, that wedge, with all the rings that you have, and you see that whatever you do, you're never going to have good adaptation of the matrix with good contour of the tooth and achieve a good proximal contact. So these are also cases that it's much easier to do that indirectly. So you don't need to prepare the tooth to cover all the cusp. You have your normal cavity for a direct restoration. You just need to block out some undercuts with the immediate dentin sealing, and you're good to go. You know, your technician can bring the tooth as further away as you can, something that is not possible all the time with the matrix. I hope you guys agree, you know, with that. Some other cases, and in Bulgaria we get a lot of those big old amalgam restorations. Under them we usually find also a lot of cracks. So these are really suitable cases for indirect ceramic restorations that cover the whole occlusal surface of the tooth. So this is just a simple case of a single tooth restoration. And if you notice, on the second molar we have a small proximal lesion. So we always combine direct and indirect approaches. You know, we're not just, we do only that, or I do only this. This is very limiting. You know, I want to take advantage of the complete arsenal that we have with direct, indirect, and prosthetic approach. Another case, this we can use indirect ceramic restorations on endodontically treated teeth. You know, in Bulgaria, people are with thinking, like the patients are thinking, oh, this tooth has a root canal treatment, I have to get a crown on that tooth. Okay, and now we know that we don't need to crown every single endodontically treated tooth, and those ceramic indirect restorations work very well, even in extreme situations of teeth that need endodontic retreatment, that they have deep, also proximal lesions. And even if we have an old crown, you know, I was thinking before, if we have a crown, the only thing we can do is another crown, okay? But this is not right. Of course, most of the time, the tooth under the crown is very destroyed, and it's going to be hard for us to do an adhesive restoration. But when I started noticing, you know, and you see some cases, I'll show you some cases like that, where we have some residual enamel all around the tooth under the crown, we can still isolate very easily and very easily restore it with an adhesive restoration, like in this case. And then we can combine everything. You know, that's the greatest part. We can combine direct, indirect, partial, full coverage, treating like a whole quadrant, especially if you have an in-office CAD/CAM system. You can do this very efficiently in a single visit manner, where you prepare, you do your appropriate directs where you can, and you finish the other restorations indirect. So this is like a single visit restoration with a small break for the patient while we do the overlay and the two inlays, sort of. So now we know the cases that we can use those restorations, but let's see the basic techniques that we can utilize. And this is going to be a bit hard for me to speak about, you know, having Pascal in the room, you know, with about IDS. I mean, come on. If I was from here, I would probably be banging on the door of Mania Education every day until you guys let me in and just stay with you, you know? Like, if you've seen Fight Club, you know, the guy that wants to join Fight Club, he's camping outside of the house, and he's like, hey, guys, let me in. So that would be me. So hard for me to speak about that in front of you. I'm a bit worried, not gonna lie. But the immediate dentin sealing for me is such a fundamental procedure, you know, in the process of making indirect posterior restorations. And it's a wonderful paper that you guys can check it out. And the whole biomimetic restorative dentistry book is a must-have for everybody. I've reviewed it a couple of times, and I find there not only knowledge, but I find a lot of inspiration, and I have fun while I'm reading it, so it's a must-have. Anyway, back to the topic. So the immediate dentin sealing, first of all, it protects the dentin surface from any contamination. Okay, that's pretty obvious. I mean, you don't need to elaborate much on that. It protects the preparation surface, so nothing in between the visits of the preparation and the bonding can get dirty, or whatever is on the preparation we can very easily clean. It protects tooth vitality. Of course, if the tooth is vital, we want to keep it that way. But also, if the tooth has endodontic treatment, we can seal the endocavity, and then nothing can recontaminate the endodontic treatment again. Of course, doing the bonding to dentin immediately after preparation is proven to optimize the adhesion to dentin. So if you don't need all the other reasons to do IDS, you know, I think this is a key one. It minimizes post-op sensitivity because we don't leave any dentin uncovered, and it improves the adhesion of the final indirect restoration. Just something that I want to add, some important steps on the dentin sealing is at the end of the dentin sealing, we want to remove the oxygen inhibited layer. So usually that we do polymerization through glycerin gel. And we want to remove any residual adhesive material. It can be adhesive, it can be flowable composite from the enamel margins. So we want our enamel margins to be clean for the final cementation. Immediate dentin sealing is basically just carrying out a very strict adhesive protocol, you know, isolating with a rubber dam, cleaning with our air abrasion device, and then just following the adhesive protocol for our adhesive system that we're using. So we're going to be doing a bit different steps if you're using Optibond FL or if you're using like a universal adhesive, but just make sure to complete all the steps in the right manner for your adhesive system. Also, I think that the effect of the immediate dentin sealing is very obvious when we have patients with cracked molars. Okay, so the patients with cracked teeth, they usually can present themselves with a variety of symptoms. You know, they can be painful to hot and cold, or they can, the teeth can be painful on chewing or just, you know, putting force on the tooth. What is important for me is first the endodontic diagnosis. Okay, we want to establish if this tooth is vital, if this tooth has inflamed pulp, or if it has necrotic pulp. Because if the tooth is vital, of course that we want to try to keep it vital for as long as possible. It's nice to inform the patient that these teeth will always need a closer monitoring, closer follow-up, so that if something happens, you can always re-intervene without even removing the restoration. So I started cleaning here, and this is you know, not always the crack is going to be so evident. I decided to stop chasing the crack in the area of the pulp chamber because I knew that I was very close to the pulp now, and I don't want to just remove it all and go inside the pulp and do endodontic treatment. You know, I want to keep the tooth vital. So I just clean as much as I can, especially around my enamel margins and on the periphery of the tooth, and then I just carry out immediate dentin sealing protocol. So it's just the adhesive protocol and covering with a thin layer of a flowable composite. You know, and the point is the symptoms of the patient are resolved. You know, now if the patient bites on the tooth, I'd give them a cotton roll. You know, the sensation of the painful sensation is already gone. So this is the treatment part of the whole process. The indirect restoration that we put on top is just going to be the long-lasting protection of what we've created underneath. So it's like a strong shield for the tooth. Another very useful technique that I have to utilize quite often, you know, I often get really deep proximal lesions, old restorations that are really deep, is the deep margin elevation. You know, again, Pascal, thank you for sharing this. And you know, you guys can read that this technique actually dates back to to using amalgam for like gold indirect restoration. So it's nothing new, but I think that with the materials and the techniques that we have nowadays is a really, really great technique to master. So the idea is pretty basic. We want to relocate the deep subgingival margin in an area that is more easily accessible for our rubber dam isolation, for our impressions or scanning, and for the cementation as well. That's great. I mean, the idea is great. What's hard about deep margin elevation is doing it on the patient, you know, on the extreme cases, because basically we're going to have a subgingival defect, and I like to use the deep margin elevation when I'm over the CEJ limit, so I'm already in the root surface of the tooth. If I have enamel, I don't want to block it with a deep margin elevation. I want to keep that enamel for the final cementation. But if it's below the CEJ, you know, I would try to do a deep margin elevation. The tricky moment here is the matrix choice and the adaptation. And you guys have to get that perfectly, because the opportunity for us to adjust anything on the adaptation of the material in that delicate area or the emergence profile is basically zero. You go in with a strip and you're going to mess up the emergence profile. You go in with a diamond burr or like a diamond oscillating tip, it gets like a super rough surface that is not possible to polish. So if you have the perfect matrix adaptation, and high magnification here helps so much, you just get a nice contour, nice adaptation of the material, perfect adaptation of the material to the root surface, and this is something that will provide, you know, health for the soft tissues and everything. And this is something that can give you a lot of trouble. You know, I've struggled a lot with the adaptation of the matrix, especially in extreme cases. We don't want to get only the correct adaptation, but also the correct emergence profile. And this is where your normal sectional matrix just doesn't cut it for a deep margin elevation, because the emergence profile that you get with it is either just too vertical or it even goes inside the tooth, so on the opposite direction. Remember that you want the emergence profile in that area going in a coronal direction to be convergent. So you need the right matrix for that technique. So it's usually those Toffel-Mayer type of matrices. You know, there's a lot of brands on the market, but you want one that is going to give you this convergent, divergent, I'm sorry, in coronal direction emergence profile. Like, here's a quick case. So we have endo-treated tooth, the second premolar. I isolate, I just disassemble the old restoration. You see a small lesion on the first premolar that I did just freehand restoration. I kept the buccal cusp intact because it was pretty thick, so I decided not to reduce that one. We do our endodontic treatment, we do on the previous slide, you can see the deep margin elevation, the contour that is following the natural contour of the tooth, and you also see on the x-ray that we have the correct emergence profile. Then we can go do our endodontic treatment. So usually those cases I'm doing in a single visit manner, you know, in a couple of hours. We fill the endo cavity, and you can see that the emergence profile, comparing it to the mesial side of the tooth, is pretty similar. And the adaptation of the material is, you don't see any gap or any ledge. Right. So we do lithium disilicate onlay for this tooth, and we bond it with heated composite. I'll tell you more about it. So some extreme cases, you know, even like the normal Toffel-Mayer matrix is just not going to be enough. And here I think the technique with the matrix in a matrix, or the double matrix technique, is very useful. So you put one, then you put the strip from the same matrix. Usually I'm using a small strip from the same matrix, and with some Teflon tape between the two matrices, you're pushing the second one to adapt to the tooth structure. Still, you should be careful, because packing the Teflon between the two matrices always brings the emergence profile inside the tooth. So you need something, and sometimes I'm even holding it with an instrument or putting some like block out resin to hold the matrix in the correct position so I get a nice emergence profile. Now, when we have like these concavities, and you know, this is something that's going to happen quite often with molars, especially on those really deep cases, I still try to keep the margin as low as possible, you know, and give enough height for the technician to work out the normal contour and the proximal contact of the future restoration. So if I leave my deep margin elevation too high, and I think this is a common mistake that we've all done, is leaving our deep margin elevation too high, too on the coronal, it can lead to those mushroom types of emergence profile of the restoration, which I don't really like, and it tends to have a more foot impaction in those areas. Probably my favorite technique about bonding the indirect restorations, doesn't matter if it's posterior, anterior, veneers, or onlays, is the bonding with the heated composite. You know, there are a lot of advantages to this technique compared to the dual-cure resin cements and also to the flowable composites. You know, I know that flowable composite is a very popular option for cementing, but what I like about the heated composite is that it has better stability of the restoration while we're working. So you can position the restoration. You don't need to hold it all the time. You can release it for a second to clean the excess. The cleaning is much easier than with a flowable material. And you can have like a really almost perfectly clean margin before you even polymerize. And you can make sure, visually inspect that the restoration is in the correct, stable position that you need to bond it to. Also, really nice, nice papers from our bioemulation friends, David Gerdau, Stefan Broe, and Marco Gresnicht, is about the no-finishing concept and the multi-luting. So the no-finishing concept is basically something that you can do with the heated composite, and the residue of the material is so small that you don't need to remove anything with burr or strips. You just need to polish the margin after you're done, and you're good to go. You know, this saves so much time on the finishing part that is just great. And the multi-luting is, again, with the heated composite, that you can bond a few pieces at the same time. Very predictably and very easily, because it provides greater stability than the flowable materials, and of course you have so much more time than using like a dual cure resin-based cement. When you're positioning a few pieces together at the same time, this actually helps them to go in the right position. You know, we've all been there. You know, you're bonding veneers and you're like, I'm going to start from the central. You bond one central and everything is great, until you try the second one, you know, and then you realize that you messed up just a tiny, tiny bit the position of that first veneer, and now nothing else fits, you know. So even in posteriors, when we have a few restorations, of course, we have to pay attention to the order that we need to insert them in so they can reach their final position, but you can easily do a few at a time. You know, David is doing like 8 at the time. So I think I've worked it out up until 3, 4 for now, but I'll try to do more next time. Combining all these wonderful techniques can really help us treat endodontically treated teeth. And I have a lot of those kind of cases. You know, endo was already done a few years ago or many, many years ago. Patients have a failing restoration, so now I need to restore an endodontically treated tooth that first the tooth doesn't have the sensation of a vital tooth, right? So it's much more prone to fractures, much more prone to cracks. Because if you have a vital tooth and you have like a little stone in your meal and you bite on it, you know, you're going to feel that and you're just going to react by opening. With the non-vital teeth, it's not like that. If you get like a little piece and you smash it, you know, you can fracture your tooth much, much more easily. That doesn't mean that we have to crown every single endodontically treated tooth. And I like to think that if I want to crown that tooth, I will remove so much healthy tooth structure that I'm just going to be left with a root. And then I have to do like a post and core buildup, you know. I really don't like that approach. So I like to keep as much enamel as possible, you know, do a immediate dentin sealing even before the endodontic treatment. So the pre-endo immediate dentin sealing, I think, is a wonderful way to optimize our adhesive protocols, because the sodium hypochlorite that we're going to use for the endo has a negative impact on the adhesion to dentin. We can combine that with already elevating the deep margins, you know, creating like a pre-endodontic buildup that can hold our cleaning solutions and temporary restorations much better than just a deep cavity. Of course, in those kind of cases, for the last almost 10 years, I haven't used a post of any kind. Not metal, not zirconia, no fiber post, you know. I haven't used a post because I don't see the point in using a post in that case, in those kind of cases, you know, even if it's more destructive teeth. And I'm going to show you just a little bit. And this all works out to using adhesively bonded restorations even for extreme cases where the teeth don't have much residual tissues left. They have endodontic treatment or retreatment. And I think it's a wonderful approach, because even if the restoration fails at a certain point, we're left with so much from the real tooth that we can always re-intervene. We can do another ceramic restoration. We can crown the tooth, you know, but the tooth is going to be there. From the restorative materials, we have endless supply. You know, we have a wardrobe full of ceramic blocks, endless supply. But we never will get more real enamel or dentin. Well, that might change in the future with all those crazy, like, genetic stuff, but for now, we will not get more enamel or dentin, whatever we do. Like, here's a usual case that I get. Crowns are a popular option in Bulgaria, so we get a lot of crown retreatments. Funny thing is, patients are happy. Well, doc, I had that for 15 years, so it did the job, right? But okay, but what are we going to do now, and how can I utilize adhesive techniques in this kind of situation? Once I remove the crowns and isolate with the rubber dam, I can do a quick inspection of the teeth and just ask myself a very important question right now. If I want to do a crown on that tooth, and I'm talking about those vertical preparation crowns, you know, what do I have to remove and what do I have to build up? So I will have to remove this very small residual enamel that I have in the cervical part, okay, because if I keep that and do a vertical crown, means I have an undercut. I will not be able to go over the limit of the enamel. And then, of course, I have to build up, like here on the distal, you see the cavity on the molar, and I have to build up the coronal part of the core buildup. Okay, so in this case, I decide I don't need to remove a lot. It's just a very small piece of enamel. There are a lot of areas where enamel is already missing, so I will do a vertical crown in this case. But even doing vertical crowns, we can use the adhesive techniques to just maximize our treatment. Of course, we're starting with immediate dentin sealing. So I'm sealing everything, and I'm filling that cavity here on the distal that you see on the molar. Once I remove the rubber dam, I'm going to remove gently with a burr that residual enamel and free that area for my future restoration. I scan that, and this is, again, we do that in a single visit. I scan that, and you know, those cases had me wondering, how do I build up the rest of the core buildup so it has the most appropriate shape for the future restoration? Well, it's really hard to know that, because you can't just visualize in your mind the future shape of the tooth. So usually what I'm doing is I'm designing the tooth on a CAD software, and then I'm reducing it in height to get the perfect uniform thickness of the future crown. So I break it in two. I have the little core, indirect core buildups that are made from composite material, CAD-CAM composite material, combined with the already made PMMA crown for the future preparation. Patient comes in for a second session, very short one, where I do the bonding of the little pieces, you know, those kind of core lace, or I like to call them the Lego buildups. And then I can put the temporary crown, perfectly fit to the new preparation. So the patient comes with 2 loose crowns, broken crowns, goes home with 2 single PMMA crowns. After a few weeks, I'm going to scan and take a final impression, and we're going to finalize the case with 2 monolithic zirconia crowns done by me and the technician that I have in the clinic. And you saw that I use stone models, and we were talking yesterday with Juan, and he got a funny question: why do you do something that you do? And he said, well, the first reason is I love it. And that's the reason that I still do stone models, because I love the stone models. They're so precise. The detail there, if you have a good impression, is just unmatched. You know, printing is so cool and so useful for so many things. But I just enjoy working with the stone, you know. I do my own preparation dyes, and this is kind of like a good exercise and also like a state of meditation, you know. You're so focused not to mess the margin and everything. I just love working with stone. And of course, another good reason is still I think that stone is more precise and more accurate than the printing. Of course, if you can take a good impression. So I want to give you a quick glimpse of the workflow that I'm using, because it's based on combining all the wonderful digital tools that we have with analog precision. And we were talking with another speaker that you're going to see later, Martin, yesterday, and I took that from you. He said, oh, you're using the DigiLog, so it's like digital analog workflow. So I really liked it. Now I branded it with the bioemulation logo, so you guys can't use that term anymore. Just kidding, of course. So let's get into it. No, patient comes in, I'm always starting with a preoperative scan. You know, first thing I do when the patient gets in the chair, I scan the existing situation. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. You know, this is like the baseline, point 0. Doing indirect posterior restorations, usually we have a lot of references from the pre-op condition that the technician can easily follow and give us the right shape, the right size, the right inclination of the cusps, just based on the information that we have before the treatment. Before anesthetizing, I'm also scanning the antagonist and the occlusion of the patient. Now I know that it's very little chance, and I verify all the steps. You know, I see what's on the screen. I try to look in the mouth of the patient. Is it similar? Is it the same? Do I have big intersections between the scans, you know, which might lead to some problems later in the lab? So I'm always gathering this information right as the patient sits in the chair, before they stay in the, before they stare with their mouth open for 2 hours and so on, before I prepare the teeth. Then I will do my preparation protocol, and I'll do my preparation scan. I will combine everything, you know, in a nice little bundle for my technician, like a very solid frame for the technician to follow in terms of shape, size, occlusion, proximal contacts. And most of the time they need to just copy what is already existing on the preoperative scan and just work out some small morphology details. I'm always looking at the other side, so the contralateral tooth. So if it's a healthy tooth, perfect, scan that, send it to the lab, use it as a mirror copy. You know, it's going to fit so nicely into that frame of the tooth in terms of shape and size that it's going to be very easy. And I guarantee you're not going to find a better tooth for that preparation in an ExoCAD library or whatever. So I always look at the contralateral. You know, and even if it's not the perfect tooth, if it provides some reference for the technician, it is still useful to scan that. And I love that with the digital technologies, is that you can provide so much information and match it and stack it and send it to the technician. It's really hard for them to have any confusion what is going on and what they need to do. Right as I finish the scanning, I'm just going to take a very small impression. So this is not like a full arch impression. I use a very small closed metal tray for the silicone. So I take impression from the preparations and a couple of adjacent teeth. You know, I don't need much more than that. I just need to make from the impression, I need to make a stone die of the preparation and a solid model that's going to help us check the proximal contacts. Usually the occlusal contacts, in cases like that, we're not checking, we're just doing on the computer based on the intraoral scan. Now combining all that information, you know, and we spoke about the phenotype project, so Abdi, that was like my half topic, but Javi already, you know, he presents it so nicely, and Bruno was speaking about copying natural morphology. But of course, with the phenotype templates and copying natural morphology, you just get so correct in terms of shape when we're talking about indirect posterior restorations that we're always trying to use a natural shape of the tooth to copy, you know, and to design the future restoration. Now, from the impression, we're making, as you already saw, a stone die of the prep. This is the model that we're working on and optimizing the fit after the milling process has been done. So, you know, milling lithium disilicate can cause some chips on the material, especially if you get too thin around the margins. So we usually in the lab, what we do is we give it a bit of a horizontal border that when it's milled, I need to fit it on the model and gently with a microscope go with a rubber wheel and just put it back to the tooth until I have like almost this perfect adaptation of the contours of the existing preparation and the restoration. Now when we crystallize and this was Emax cat that you saw, this is after the crystallization. Usually what we're doing with my technician, she's just staining the occlusal surfaces and everything else we're just polishing. You know, I don't like to glaze the ceramic that much. I think it kind of kills the surface. So I much more like for the ceramic to be polished rather than glazed. So just staining on the occlusal and maybe some white spots, you know, on the buccal, stuff like that. But we try not to glaze the restorations. When we're not glazing, also the chance to have the glaze on the inner surface of the ceramic is non-existent. But I'll show you that dirty stuff get on the inside of the ceramic that you should be careful about as well. So on the solid model, we always have a solids check model without any dies, so nothing there is moving. This is the model that I'm checking the proximal contacts on. And I want to see, do those pieces fit together on the solid model the same way that they're fitting on the preparation? If there is a slight difference, that means something on the proximal is preventing them to fit in that way. And you know, I was wondering, is it what I'm doing that accurate? You know, the stone impressions and the printed models and everything. So I decided to make like this little plastic that they use for the dentures, the light cured base for dentures. And so I quickly made it on the stone model, you know, just to have something that fits there very closely to the preparations. And I just tried to bring it inside the mouth and see that it fits the same way. And you can see on the slide that it fits pretty much, I mean, the same way that it fits on the model. So I'm pretty sure that those little solid models that we do are a very good representation of the actual situation in the mouth. I don't have it in the slides, but I can show you how that looks with a printed model, you know, and you always have a bit more gaps in the printed model than this. And then we can finalize the case. Okay, all good until now? Hope you guys like it. Let's discuss a bit now the step-by-step protocol that I'm doing. And I told you that I really like to practice a lot, so this is something that I do as practice. And I've done it probably 1,000 times. Every single wisdom tooth that I can get my hands on goes through some kind of practice. You know, I love practicing on extracted teeth rather than models. Of course, we can do some exercise on models as well, where we have more teeth to work on, but just the feeling of exercising on a natural tooth, you know, how the burr feels against the enamel and the dentin and old materials is just something that you can't actually simulate that well on the plastic models. You know, not that they're not useful, you can do like class 2 restorations on them and everything, but usually I practice on extracted teeth. And what I'm going to show you and what I know and what I'm sharing, of course I didn't come up with that, you know, but I was so happy to learn from, I think, some of the best in this area. And I have to say about my first teachers about the indirect posterior restorations was Gianfranco Politano from Italy and Professor Pumans from the Catholic University in Leuven. So I just decided to join one of their courses, and they immediately took me under their wing. You know, I will be forever grateful to both of them and to Gianfranco for teaching me. You know, he was sharing everything that he knows. And of course, sadly, he passed away last year. So I'm never going to stop showing those guys, you know, because it's important where we learn from and who are our teachers, our mentors. And in that journey, they also become our friends, our closed ones, and you get it. So thinking about the preparation principles that I've learned from Gianfranco, the preparation must have the most simple geometry. So we don't want any big like boxes or anything, just the more simple, the better. We want to achieve a uniform thickness of the restorative material, of the ceramic. So this is going to be like 1.5 to 2 millimeters of thickness. Of course, in some cases that can be more, or in some areas it can be more, but if we have a more uniform thickness material, it's just going to perform in the same way around the whole restoration. We want to avoid corners and sharp edges. We want our preparation margins and the whole preparation surface to be promoting compressive forces and to distribute the force towards the dentinal core and the composite core of the tooth, not outside. We want very smooth and soft transitions between surfaces and margins. And we want to keep as much enamel as possible for the adhesive cementation. I would add a few more parameters from myself, and one would be correct margin location, speaking in the occlusal direction, so how coronal we can leave a margin, or do we need to put it down more subgingivally, and of course going toward the proximal contacts. You know, we want to position our margins outside of the zone of the proximal contact, where we have good separation from the neighboring tooth, where we can easily isolate, easily take impressions, you know, and our technicians can easily mark the margin and work out that area. And of course, we want to have passive insertion direction, okay? So we don't want to have any undercuts, we don't want to have any retentive elements. We want those restorations to have a passive fit, but they also should have a final stable position. So once you put it on the preparation or on the stone die, you don't want that ceramic piece to move and to slide around. You know, this is going to make cementation a lot more difficult. So yeah, stable final position of the restoration, very important. Okay, so I get a beautiful wisdom tooth, actually a tooth of one of my friends, and I'm going to do some practicing on it, but I said it's really beautiful, so I'm just gonna give it some honors, you know, and I'll take step-by-step protocol pictures of what I'm doing. And that's why I have the pictures, just because I wanted to document step-by-step from different angles. But before I started, of course, I wanted to have some nice pictures to say bye-bye to the tooth. Of course, I also scan it before that. That's important. So for the removal of the old restoration, I'm going in with a round diamond burr, and I don't use the high-speed turbine. You know, you gotta ditch that. You gotta get the electric motor, like 1 to 5, much better control, much better stability. So I use high speed with water cooling to remove the old restoration, to remove the majority of the caries. You know, and in this situation, I decided, okay, I'll do like a deep MOD cavity on a vital tooth and undermine the remaining buccal and lingual walls. So you see the cavity. Then I will go with my cusp reduction. So here I would advise you to use a burr that's either a caliber for 1.5 millimeters or a burr that its diameter is already 1.5 millimeters. So here I'm aiming for a preparation that has a uniform thickness of around 1.5 to 2 millimeters, okay? So that burr is like an olive-shaped burr. Our olive-shaped burr is in the thickest part is 1.5 millimeters. So I use that as a caliber. And here what is very important is the direction of the burr, the angulation of the burr, okay? So if you do that parallel to parallel to the axis of the tooth, then you're going to end up with not enough reduction going toward the center of the tooth, toward the central fissure. So here I like to follow the inside inclination of the cusp when I'm doing the markings. I sink the burr until 1.5 millimeters, and you see something like that, okay? I continue with the same direction and the same orientation of the burr and just connect all those little slots. You know, I want to see that morphological characteristic of the preparation, so you can see I have a bit more of a peak, where is the tip of the cusp, then is the slope going down to the next one. So I don't want to do it like flat, you know, I want to keep that morphological shape and flow kind of going. But you also don't want to do like the McDonald's prep, you know, like the golden arches. You guys know about it. Okay, so before we continue, here's something to discuss. Now when we see the margins, here we can see that the surface of the margin is parallel to the direction of the enamel prisms. Meaning that if we keep this kind of margin, we're going to be bonding to the side of the enamel prism. And we want our adhesive system to go between those prisms, you know, and get such a big enamel surface for the bonding. But also this kind of margin is going to distribute the forces going outside of the tooth, you know, towards the buccal and the lingual. So the protective effect of the restoration is going to be severely diminished. So the next step that we do is the marginal preparation. For that step, again, I go with the olive-shaped burr. Now I'm going with the smoother red diamond burr, slower speed. You know, I'm still using gentle water cooling, still enough to see what you're doing. And again, the most important thing is the angle that you're holding the burr. So now we want to go opposite of that, what we're doing on the cusp reduction. So I can cut through the enamel prisms, get a really smooth margin and transition, you know, going from the buccal to the proximal, lingual, and then going back around. So this is the burrs that I'm using. And here you just need to be gentle. You know, everything that we're doing, doesn't matter if it's restorative, if it's surgery even, I think that we have to be really gentle. You know, you don't need to push your handpiece, you don't need to push the burr, just let it go, you know, let it just do its work. Let the preparation get the shape of the burr that you're using. And this is something that you just have to go with it, you know. Let your hand flow on the tooth surface and it's going to work wonders, you know. Don't rush it as well. You need time to do that. Okay, so now when we look on the marginal surface, we can see that we've cut through the enamel prisms, and this is a margin that can promote the forces going to the inside of the tooth, which is going to be something that can really decrease the flexing of the remaining buccal and lingual walls. Basically, at that time, we're ready to start with the immediate dentin sealing protocol. So I'm going to go with the air abrasion. Usually, I use the aluminum oxide 29 microns from AquaCare combined with the silk particles, just because they clean the surface so well. Then we go with our adhesive system, and here I'm trying to stay away from the enamel margins. Of course, some small residual from the material is going to get there, but I still try to not, not put my adhesive everywhere on the tooth. I try to stay away from the enamel margin. And actually, at that step, the immediate dentin sealing is done. If you have the perfect cavity geometry, you don't need to correct any undercut or build up any from the dentin. You can just leave it like that. Polymerize it through glycerin gel for the oxygen inhibited layer, and you're good to go. But if you need to build a bit the dentin, this would be the moment now to do it with the composite of your choice. You know, usually here I use a combination of Everex Flow dentin in a few increments, and then I will cover it with a very thin layer of the Genial Flow X. And that material, as I told you, I'm trying not to touch with the instrument. I'm just letting it flow everywhere by itself. Just give it a few seconds and you get like a super, super smooth, super glossy surface. Again, when we finish, super important, remove the oxygen inhibited layer, polymerizing through glycerin gel. Then we can do like a very gentle re-preparation of the margin just to make sure that we remove any residual adhesive or composite material that even after working so carefully, you know, it's always a little bit of material there, and we want our enamel margins to be clean for the final restoration. And this is how the preparation looks at the end. We've already discussed, I always scan the tooth when I'm doing that kind of exercise, because then I can scan the prep and then I can start measuring, you know. And remember that I was aiming for 1.5 millimeters, and I have to tell you guys, I didn't get there, you know. I wasn't at 1.5, you know. I was like 8 microns short, so, you know, you can always get better, you can get more precise. But I like to see if my preparation has any undercuts, if it has like a uniform thickness of the restoration. So this is something that you can use the digital tools as well. Now that we get a beautiful ceramic piece from the lab, first thing I do is I check the inside. You know, spending so much time in the lab, I know what's going on. These pieces, they roll around the floor. People are touching it always with their naked hands. You know, it's not the cleanest place, actually, the dental laboratory. So it's normal for the restoration to have some stuff on the inside that can influence our treatment of the surface, okay? So I always inspect that. And if I have a bit of glaze, a bit of dirt, it's something that I want to clean even before I do a try-in, okay? So gently with the AquaCare, with aluminum oxide and water, but really crank down the power and the powder just to not damage the ceramic. I'll try to blow away any residue of the glaze or whatever that there is, so we get a really nice clean surface. I will also quickly clean the preparation with a Profi brush and some paste, and then I can do a quick try-in of the tooth. Now when I know that I'm going to be bonding that ceramic, I just go with the the usual protocol for treating the ceramic pieces. For the hydrofluoric acid, you know, guys, on the bottle there is a skull for a reason, right? It's, you have to use protective equipment like gloves, mask. If you're using that in the mouth, always do it under rubber dam, but be careful with that one. I like to help it with a small micro brush just to reach better the edges of the restoration and to make sure I'm etching well on the margins. You know, then we do cleaning with orthophosphoric acid, we do the ultrasonic bath, then we go with our silane for the ceramic, and basically the pieces is ready to go. So I'm just gonna leave it on the side for now, and I'll go back to the preparation. You know, I'll isolate with a rubber dam, I'll clean it with the AquaCare, I'll etch all the surface because now I don't have dentin, I have only enamel and composite, you know, so I'm just etching everything and cleaning for 30 seconds until I get this like frosty appearance of the tooth. Then I go with my adhesive system. I don't polymerize anything on this step, you know, and very important, my assistant comes in and covers the preparation so we don't get any polymerization of the material. Then I will get a little bit of adhesive and I will put it on the ceramic. I know there are a lot of opinions about that topic, but as Juan says, I just love it, you know, and when we're using composite-based materials, I think it improves the adaptation of the composite material towards the ceramic. So I'm always putting a bit of adhesive on the ceramic piece, and then I go with a portion that I adapt and thin out from the heated composite. I place it on a tooth, and usually with a thin instrument, I remove the residue. You know, you can play with it for a while, you know, push it again, remove more, clean with a brush, and then when everything is clean, you can polymerize. You know, we need more time to discuss this technique in depth because how we clean on the proximal and everything like that, you know, we have to get into detail, and it's maybe like a 2 hours presentation only on the technique. So for the finishing, what I'm doing usually I'm using a composite scaler and just a normal polishing system. So I really like the Eve polishing like wheels, and it's the only one that I'm using. If you clean the residue before you polymerize well enough, you're just going to need to polish. It takes a few seconds, so you're ready to go. You don't have to go with your burrs and stones and 300 rubbers, you know, to polish. And the final result. So this is another exercise that I'm doing. Okay, so I'll just skip one case because I'm already running low on time. Hope you guys can bear with me. And this is again a case of crowns. And when I see that, first thing I notice is those crowns are huge, right? Look at the premolars and look at the molars. Okay. Molars are usually a bit bigger than premolars, but not that much more bigger. So I'm wondering, why is that? Why is such a big crown, you know? Maybe the dentist didn't prepare enough, which is going to be great for me, you know, going forward with the treatment, or the technician was, I don't know, drunk or something. And you know, knowing Bulgarian technicians, I wouldn't be surprised. So we isolate. I love to remove crowns on the rubber dam. We continue to, we remove the crowns. Now I see like a blob of different materials. I still have no idea what's going on underneath. Then I remove everything and I see all this wonderful enamel left, you know, and I ask myself the same question. Do I have to remove everything and make a crown, or I can just seal the dentin and do a bonded ceramic restoration? And that's what I will do, because if I see that we see on the first, like the first pictures, if I see that and I didn't know that the teeth had a crown before that, I would never suggest to do a crown. Of course, here you can do deep margin elevation. I was just running a bit low on time, so I decided I'll just go forward with the immediate dentin sealing, and I'll kind of bite the bullet and work with the deep margin. You know, I'm going to have a bit tougher time isolating, taking impressions, working in the lab, but still you can do a really nice result. We do the ceramics, and then we bond them simultaneously with heated composite. Especially in those extreme cases, I like to take a bite wing or a parallel X-ray just to see if I fitted them in a correct position and if I have some residue. So you can see that even in those kind of extreme situations, you can achieve a very nice result and still preserve so much more from the tooth. You know, and this is like a year-and-a-half recall. I get the chance to see the patient last week before we left, and of course I finished the premolars with direct restorations. So now, closing, I would like to express my gratitude again to Abdi, to Raz, to everybody from the Biomulation group. You guys have been such inspiration and such a great influence, not only for my professional you know, development, but also as a person. But I want to bring you now, you know, now this take me to Los Angeles. I would never thought that I would have this great opportunity, and you know, I know about Los Angeles since I was a little kid, because I was a huge Lakers fan, you know, and that's me, little me right here, holding a Lakers ball, you know, and that's actually a pretty famous basketball coach in Bulgaria. You guys don't know anything about him. And, you know, I didn't even want to be a dentist, you know, so that's me like 15 years ago scrubbing warehouses for a living, you know. That Pierre right there, he doesn't have an idea that he will be doing lecture in Los Angeles, you know. I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. And even though I wasn't as good playing basketball, you know, I always gave my best. And that's something that I try to do in dentistry. And that would be me, you know. This is Kobe in his jammies in Staples Center, shooting free throws with a broken hand. And, you know, just the work ethic and what he called the Mamba mentality is something that I try to you know, try to take in my work as well. Always give my best. Always try more. Be the hardest working guy in the team. And yeah, so many friends. I just can't express how happy I am to know you guys and to be around you everywhere. I will not say any names because it's too many. Well, I'll say one, Martin, Agent 001, my very good friend that came to Bulgaria. And you should know, when we switch places and you're up here, I'll be there cheering you on, brother. Just 1 second, because I saved the best for last, and it's my beautiful wife, Marlene, that accompanies me on our journeys. Thank you so much. And in the words of my late teacher, Gianfranco, all we need is love. And it's been a journey, and the journey is just beginning. Thank you, guys.
I mean, honestly,